My father threw me out as I held my newborn. I, a mother, left with a blanket and hope. Years passed in silence. When they expected me broken, I showed a life that made their hands shake. The rain lashed my face, mixing with the tears I could no longer hold back. Ethan cried in my arms, his tiny body shivering from the cold under the thin blanket. My father stood in the doorway, his face red with anger, his eyes so unfamiliar, as if I were a stranger. "Get out of my house," he croaked, and I felt a chill in my chest. "You brought this on yourself. Now live with it." Mom stood behind him, curled up in a ball by the living room door. She didn't look at me, just twisted a kitchen towel in her hands as if it were the most important thing in the world. "Mom," I whispered, trying to shout over the wind. "Mom, say something to him." Deborah Turner looked up for a second. I saw pain in them, but also something else. Relief. As if she could finally get rid of a problem she didn't know how to solve. "Jess, honey," she began quietly, but Dad cut her off sharply. "Not a word." She made her choice when she went for the first jerk she could find. Now she can deal with it herself. I held Ethan closer to my chest. He was only 3 months old, and the doctors had already told us that he had heart problems, a congenital defect that would require surgery, expensive surgery. That was what finally broke my dad's peace of mind. The bills from the hospital kept coming, and the insurance only covered part of the costs. Dad worked as a mechanic at a car repair shop on the outskirts of town, and Mom worked as a cleaner in an office center. Money was always tight, and now this disaster. "Dad, I'm working," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'm giving everything I earn at the supermarket. We'll manage." "Manage?" He laughed bitterly. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to treat this child? $15,000 for the first operation alone, and then more and more. With your cashier's salary?" Ethan cried even louder, as if he could sense the tension in the air. I began to rock him, whispering soothing words that seemed empty to me. It all started so innocently. I was 24 when I met Kyle. He worked as a truck driver and came to our supermarket in the morning with deliveries. He was always smiling and always had a funny story to tell. At the time, I thought it was love. Kyle wasn't very smart, but he was kind. At least that's what I thought. We dated for 6 months, and I even started dreaming about a wedding, children, a little house somewhere outside the city. Typical girl dreams that were shattered when I saw the 2 lines on the test. For the first 2 months, Kyle pretended that everything was fine. He even said he would be a good father. But when I reached the 6th month and my pregnancy became obvious to everyone, he disappeared. He just didn't show up for our next date and didn't answer my calls. Later, I found out that he had changed jobs and moved to another state. Dad wasn't thrilled either, but at least he didn't kick me out. He just said, "You're such a fool, Jess. But what can we do now? We have to make a decision." Mom cried for a week, but then she calmed down and started knitting baby clothes. Ethan was born in November and seemed like a perfectly healthy baby at first. But then the doctors noticed that he got tired too quickly while feeding, and his lips sometimes turned blue. Tests revealed a defect in the ventricular septum, a hole in his heart that required surgery. "Listen, Ralph," Mom said quietly without looking up. "Maybe we shouldn't be so harsh. She's our daughter." "Our daughter?" He turned to her with an expression on his face as if she had suggested something impossible. "Our daughter would be in college, not having children with all sorts of trash. Our daughter would use her head, not—" "Enough." I raised my voice for the first time in many months. "Stop shaming me. I made a mistake, fine. But Ethan has nothing to do with it. He's your grandson." "My grandson?" Dad spat into the bushes by the doorstep. "This premature baby with a heart condition from some unknown jerk? No, thank you." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow. I took a step back, pressing Ethan to my chest as if to protect him from this cruelty. The rain intensified, and I felt water seeping through my light jacket. Ethan stopped crying and just sniffed quietly, trying to hide in the blanket. "Mom, please," I tried again. "We have nowhere to go." Just for one night. Deborah looked at her husband, then at me. I saw something like remorse in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared. "Jessica, you know your father. He's very upset about those hospital bills. Maybe if you talk to social services." Social services? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you suggesting I give up my child?" "No, I'm just saying there are programs to help. For situations like this. Situations like this." As if I were a statistic, not their daughter. Dad had already turned his back and was walking home. The conversation was over for him. Mom stood there for a second, then left too, quietly closing the door behind her. I was left alone in the rain with the baby in my arms. There was $42 in my jacket pocket. All I had. My phone showed that the battery was almost dead. The nearest bus stop was 2 blocks away. The first thought that came to mind was to call Ashley. My friend from work always said I could turn to her if anything happened. But even in such a desperate moment, I knew that this was only a temporary solution. Ashley lived with an artist in a small apartment that barely had enough room for the two of them. Ethan stirred again, and I felt the wet blanket begin to cool. I had to find shelter immediately. I turned my back on my parents' house and walked down the street, trying not to think that this might be forever. The bus arrived 20 minutes later, which seemed like an eternity. The driver looked at me and my child sympathetically and didn't charge me for the ride. I sat in the back seat and took out my phone. "Ashley?" I whispered when my friend answered. "I need help." "Jess? What happened? Are you crying?" I tried to explain the situation, but the words stuck in my throat. The bus slowly made its way through the city at night, and I looked at the lights in the windows of the houses where people were living their normal lives. "Of course. Come over," Ashley said without hesitation. "We have a couch in the living room." By the time I got to her house, it was almost 11 p.m. Ashley greeted me in her bathrobe, a concerned look on her face. Her boyfriend Dan was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, not doing a very good job of hiding his displeasure. "It's just for a little while," I hastened to explain, taking off my wet jacket, "just until I find something permanent." "You know what?" Ashley picked up Ethan while I was undressing. "Don't think about it now. You're exhausted." But I couldn't help thinking about it. Lying on the narrow sofa with Ethan next to me, I replayed everything that had happened in the last few hours in my head. My father's words echoed over and over again. "You brought this on yourself." Maybe he was right. Maybe I really was a naive fool who believed the first attractive man she met. But did Ethan deserve to be treated this way because of it? Did I deserve it? I remembered how my parents looked at that moment on the doorstep. Dad was red with anger, but there was also fatigue in his eyes. Fatigue from problems that seemed to never end. Mom was hunched over, aged as if overnight. They were suffering too, just in their own way. Ethan was sniffling next to me, his tiny hand resting on my chest. The doctors said the operation would go well if we could pay for it. If. That word had haunted me for the last few weeks. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and quiet conversation in the kitchen. Ashley and Dan were whispering, but I could still hear bits and pieces. "We can't keep them forever. Just a few days until she finds a job." "What about our wedding plans? We've been saving this money for months." I pretended to be asleep, but my heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to echo throughout the apartment. Of course they were worried. Who wouldn't be worried when someone else's problems suddenly fell on them? When Dan left for work, Ashley came over to me with a cup of coffee. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," I lied, sitting down and checking to see if Ethan was awake. "Jess, I want to talk to you about something." "Dan is worried about finances. You understand." "Of course I understand. I'm not going to be a burden on you. I'll start looking for a job today." "What about the baby? You need someone to take care of her." That was the problem I had been thinking about all night. Daycare cost money I didn't have. A nanny was even more expensive, and hiring someone unofficially was risky, especially given Itano's health problems. I'll figure something out, I said, even though I didn't really have a plan. Maybe you should contact social services. Not to give up the baby, but just for help. I've heard there are programs for young mothers. The same words my mother had used. Maybe it was a sign that I should try. After breakfast, I took Ethan and went to the social services center. The huge gray building with long lines and tired faces did not inspire optimism, but there was no choice. The woman at the reception desk gave me a stack of papers to fill out and told me to wait. I sat in the hallway for 2 hours trying to calm Ethan and watching the other visitors. Most of them looked as tired and hopeless as I felt. Finally, I was seen by a social worker named Gloria Mendez. She was a short Latina with kind eyes and a professional smile. So, Jessica, tell me about your situation. I told her everything about Kyle, about my parents, about Ethan's heart condition, about what happened last night. Gloria listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Do you have any education beyond high school? 1 year of college. I studied business but dropped out due to financial problems. Work experience. 2 years as a cashier at Fresh Mart supermarket. Before that, I was a waitress in a coffee shop. Gloria nodded and wrote something down. Okay, there are several programs that can help you. First, temporary financial assistance for housing and food. Second, health insurance for your child through the Medicaid program. Third, vocational training if you want to learn new skills. How long will it take? A few days for emergency assistance. Up to 2 weeks for insurance. But I will also refer you to a support group for young mothers. There you will meet women who have been through similar experiences. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Not great, not bright, but a real possibility that everything could work out. What about work? I asked. That's more difficult. With a child, especially one with special needs, your options are limited. But there are employers who are willing to accommodate you. Plus, there are childcare assistance programs. When I left Gloria's office, it was already getting dark outside. Ethan was asleep in the stroller Ashley had given me, and I was holding a folder with documents and phone numbers. It wasn't a solution to all my problems, but it was a start. On the way home, I stopped at a payphone and dialed my parents' number. Long beeps, then my mother's voice. Yes? Mom, it's me. Pause. Then, Jess, how are you? Where are you? At a friend's house for now. Mom, I wanted to say I'm not angry. I understand that you're worried about money. Honey, no, let me finish. I'll find a way to manage on my own. But Ethan is your grandson no matter what Dad says, and someday you'll regret pushing him away. Your father is very upset. I know, but I can't ask you for help anymore. I'll take care of everything myself. When I hung up, my hands were shaking a little, but inside, I felt calm. For the first time in a long time, I had made a decision that concerned only Ethan and me. It was scary, but it was also the beginning of something new. The room was tiny, 3 meters by 4, with a window overlooking the fire escape of the neighboring building. But it was ours. For $180 a month, I rented this space in the house of Mrs. Chang, an elderly Korean woman who rented rooms to students and people in difficult circumstances. A child should not cry at night, she said, showing me the shared kitchen and bathroom. I have 4 other tenants. Ethan is a calm child, I assured her, although I wasn't really sure. After his heart surgery, which finally happened thanks to Medicaid, he became more demanding and often woke up at night. The surgery was successful 2 weeks ago. I sat in the hospital hallway for 8 hours, waiting for the surgeons to close the hole in my son's heart. Gloria Mendez came to support me, bringing coffee and a sandwich. The first operation is the hardest, she said, sitting next to me on a plastic chair. It will get easier after that. She was right about the operation, but wrong about everything else. The bills kept coming. For anesthesia, for days in the hospital, for specialist consultations. Even with government insurance, my share was $3,000. Now, with Ethan sleeping in a folding crib next to my mattress on the floor, I counted the money I had left until the end of the week. $22. My job as a cleaner at the Tower Plaza Office Center paid $8 an hour, but only 5 nights a week. $800 a month was barely enough for rent, food, and diapers. The alarm clock rang at 9 in the evening. Time to get ready for work. Mrs. Chang agreed to look after Ethan for an extra $20 a week, but only after she was sure he wouldn't disturb the other residents too much. "Is his heart better?" she asked as I handed her a sleepy Ethan. "Yes, the doctor says it's healing well. Next checkup in a month." "Good. I'll give him a bottle at noon if he wakes up." I kissed Ethan on the forehead and left for work. The bus to downtown took 40 minutes, and I usually used that time to nap or read the brochures Gloria had given me about various assistance programs. The Tower Plaza Office Center was a 30-story glass monster filled with law firms, insurance companies, and consulting agencies. At night, it was deserted, leaving me and 3 other cleaners alone with hundreds of offices. My area included the 15th, 16th, and 17th floors. In 5 hours, I had to vacuum the carpets, mop the floors, clean the toilets, and empty the trash cans. The work was monotonous, but at least it gave me time to think. Often, while cleaning the offices of lawyers or auditors, I would look at their diplomas on the walls and photos with their families on their desks. These people had everything I once dreamed of: a prestigious job, a good salary, stability. Sometimes I imagine myself sitting at one of those desks in a business suit, making important decisions. "Jess, are you daydreaming again?" Linda, my colleague, a plump woman in her 50s with an infectious laugh, crept up to me. "I'm just thinking about what I would do if I worked in one of these offices." "What's stopping you from trying?" Linda sat down on the edge of the table. "You're young and smart. You can study. With a child? Without money? There are programs." "I heard that the college on Maple Street has evening classes for working mothers. You could look into it." I nodded but didn't say that I had already thought about it 100 times. The problem wasn't the desire to study, but the time and money. How could I manage to work, study, and take care of Ethan? The morning shift ended at 7 in the morning. I made it home, fed Ethan, put him to bed, and then napped until 2 in the afternoon. Then there were walks, doctor's appointments, shopping, and cleaning the room. The day flew by and it was time to get ready for work again. This cycle had been going on for 3 months when Gloria offered me something new. "Jessica, I want to invite you to a support group for young mothers. We meet every Thursday at 3 in the afternoon. I don't know if I have time." "Make time. You need to talk to people who understand what you're going through." The first meeting was held in the basement of St. Patrick's Church. When I walked in with Ethan in my arms, I saw a circle of 8 chairs and women of various ages with children. "Hi, I'm Jennifer," said the leader, a woman in her 40s with short hair and kind eyes. "And you must be Jessica?" I nodded and sat down in an empty chair. Next to me sat a girl who looked even younger than me, with a 3-month-old baby. "Is this your first time?" she whispered. "I'm Tamara. This is Jacob. Jessica, this is Ethan." "How old is he?" 6 months. "How old is yours?" 4. He was born prematurely, so he looks so small. Jennifer began the meeting with a round of introductions. Each woman briefly talked about herself and her situation. The stories were different, but they all had something in common: loneliness, financial difficulties, the feeling that the whole world was against you. Maria, a 23-year-old Mexican woman, was raising 2 children after her husband left her. Samantha, a 19-year-old blonde, had run away from her alcoholic parents and was now living in a shelter. Kim, an Asian woman in her 30s, had divorced her abusive husband and was fighting for custody of her daughter. When it was my turn, I briefly told them about Kyle, my parents, and Ethan's surgery. The women listened without judgment, sometimes nodding in understanding. "How do you cope with loneliness?" Jennifer asked. "I try not to think about it. I focus on Ethan and work." "What about support? Friends, relatives?" "A friend helped at first, but she has her own life." "My parents." I paused. "My parents aren't ready to talk yet." "Do you call them?" I've tried a few times. My mom sometimes answers, but the conversation is always short. She says my dad is still angry. Do you want to restore your relationship with them? I thought about it. Did I want to? Part of me did, of course. But another part remembered that night in the rain, remembered how my dad called Ethan a premature baby. I don't know. Maybe someday. But right now I need to focus on myself and my son. After the meeting, several women invited me for coffee. We sat in an inexpensive coffee shop nearby. The children slept in their strollers, and for the first time in a long time, we talked as equals. The first 6 months were the hardest, Maria said, stirring sugar into her coffee. Then you get used to being responsible for everything yourself. What about work? I asked. How do you manage with the children? My older daughter is in school, my younger daughter's in kindergarten. I work as a cashier at a bank. The salary isn't great, but it's stable. I'd like to find a day job, I admitted. The night shift is exhausting. Have you tried looking for something in the service industry? Kim asked. Restaurants, shops. They often hire part-time workers. It's difficult with a child. I need someone to look after him. Can't your relatives help? I shook my head. Samantha, who had been sitting silently, suddenly spoke up. You know, sometimes it's better without them. My parents turned their backs on me too, but now I realize it was the best thing that could have happened. Why? Because I stopped depending on them. I stopped waiting for their approval or help. I started solving my own problems. Her words stayed with me all evening. When I got home, Ethan was asleep in Mrs. Chang's arms. She gave him a bottle and rocked him when he started crying. He's a beautiful baby, she said, handing him to me. He looks like you. Thank you for taking care of him. It's okay. I had children too. I know how hard it is on your own. That night, as I got ready for work, I thought about Samantha's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe not having my parents' support had made me stronger, but it still hurt. I dialed my parents' number again. Long beeps, then a familiar voice. Hello? Mom, it's Jess. Pause. I could hear the TV in the background. Hi, sweetie. How are you? Better. Ethan is recovering from surgery. The doctors say it went well. That's good. Very good. Mom, I wanted to ask. How's Dad? Is he still angry? Another pause. Then a sigh. He doesn't talk about you, Jess. But I know what he thinks. He thinks you should have given the baby up for adoption. What do you think? I think you're doing the best you can, but it's so hard, sweetie. You're still young. You could have a normal life. This is my normal life, Mom. Ethan is my family. I know. It's just, your father worries about you in his own way. He wants you to have a better life. Tell him I will have a better life. But with Ethan, not without him. Jess. Mom, I'm not asking you to take me back home. I'm not asking for money. I just want you to know that we're okay. Ethan is growing up healthy and happy. He's your grandson, no matter what Dad thinks. When I hung up the phone, I felt something new. Not anger, not pain, but a quiet confidence. I had told the truth and not begged for forgiveness. It was a step toward becoming the woman I wanted to be. At work that night, I was cleaning the law firm's office and found a brochure on the table about evening classes at the college. Program for working adults. Get a degree without leaving your job. I slipped it into my apron pocket. Maybe Linda was right. Maybe it's never too late to start over. When Ethan was 1 year and 3 months old, I finally found a day job. The Health for All medical clinic was looking for a receptionist, and Gloria recommended me to the director. The salary was $2 an hour more than the cleaning ladies, plus health insurance for Ethan and me. Do you have any experience with medical records? Asked the director, Helen Richards, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and a penetrating gaze. No, but I'm a quick learner, and I work well with people, I replied, trying to sound confident. Gloria Mendez speaks very highly of you. She says you're reliable and responsible. I really want this job, Mrs. Richards. I need stability for my son." She looked at me for a long time, then nodded. "We'll give it a try. 1 week probation. If you can handle it, you can stay." My first day at the new job was chaotic. The clinic served mostly low-income patients, many of whom did not speak English. The phone rang constantly, people in line grew impatient, and the computer system seemed to have been designed in the last century. "Don't worry," said Rose, my colleague, when she saw how confused I looked. "For the first 2 weeks, everyone here looks like they've been struck by lightning." Rose had been working at the clinic for 5 years and knew all the ins and outs of the job. She taught me how to use the database, explained how to fill out insurance forms, and told me about each doctor. "Dr. Lindquist is the gentlest," she said, pointing to a tall blonde in a white coat walking past the reception desk. "She works here for half the salary just because she wants to help people." Dr. Sarah Lindquist looked about 35, had short blonde hair, and always smiled at patients, even when they yelled or complained. I noticed that she often stayed after work to consult with people who couldn't afford repeat visits. After a week of probation, Helen called me into her office. "Rose says you're a quick learner," she said, looking over my notes. "Patients have also been complaining less since you started working here." I try to be patient with them. "I understand that many come here because they have no other options." "Exactly. You're staying. The salary is $1,900 a month, plus insurance. We'll discuss a raise in 6 months." I could barely contain my laughter of joy. $1,900 was more than I had ever earned. Finally, I could afford to rent a small apartment instead of a room at Mrs. Chang's. Ethan was doing well after his surgery. The pediatrician said his heart was functioning normally, and the next checkup would be in 6 months. He started walking at 11 months and now explored the world incessantly, climbing everywhere he could reach. The daycare center near the clinic took him for half a day for a reasonable fee. I could have lunch with him and see him every day, not just in the morning and evening as before. "Mommy!" Ethan ran to me when I came to pick him up. He was holding a drawing of colored spots in his hands. "What's this, baby?" "A house," he declared proudly, pointing to a green spot. "And a dog." I hugged him, feeling my heart overflow with happiness. He was healthy, happy, and developing normally. Everything we had gone through was worth this moment. A month after I started working at the clinic, Dr. Lindquist approached my desk. "Jessica, do you have a minute to talk?" "Of course, Dr. Lindquist." "Call me Sarah. I wanted to talk to you about a project." We went to her office where diplomas from Harvard Medical School and photos from humanitarian missions in Africa hung on the walls. "I run a charity program for underprivileged families," she began. "We raise funds for free medicine, examinations, and sometimes operations for those who cannot afford treatment." "That's wonderful," I said, not understanding where she was going with this. "The problem is that I don't have enough time for organizational work. I need someone who can help with correspondence, coordinating events, and maintaining the donor database." "And you thought of me?" "Rose said that you did an excellent job organizing the patient files in 2 weeks, and I've noticed how you interact with people. Patiently, with understanding. That's exactly the approach this job needs. Will it be extra pay?" "Not at first. But if the project expands, we can discuss compensation. Right now, I'm offering you the opportunity to learn something new and perhaps find your calling." I thought about it. The extra work meant less time with Ethan, but it was also an opportunity for professional growth. "How many hours a week?" 5 or 6, mostly in the evenings, after work. You can work from here or from home." "Okay, I'll try." The first tasks were simple. Update the donor list, send out thank you letters, organize a file of aid recipients. But gradually, Sarah entrusted me with more and more difficult tasks. "We need to raise funds for heart surgery for a 7-year-old girl," she said a month later. "The family are illegal immigrants and don't have insurance. The operation costs $20,000. What do you usually do in such cases?" We turned to local businesses, churches, and community organizations. But this time, I thought, maybe we should try something new. What exactly? You're good at writing letters. Maybe we should expand the circle of potential donors? Reach out to larger companies, foundations. I spent the whole evening researching various charitable foundations and corporate social responsibility programs on the internet. I wrote 20 letters, tailoring each one to a specific organization. A week later, the replies started coming in. 15 rejections, but 5 positive responses. One foundation donated $5,000, a local bank donated $3,000, and the rest donated $1,000 or $2,000 each. Jessica, this is incredible. Sarah waved a check for $5,000. You raised more in a week than I did in a month. I just wrote more letters and did better research on who might be interested in helping. You have a real talent for this. Have you thought about studying in this field? Studying? Nonprofit management, charitable program management. There are online courses so you can study in your spare time. I was intrigued by the idea. At home, I found several certification programs in the nonprofit sector. One of them at Phoenix University offered evening and weekend courses. But it costs $2,000, I told Sarah the next day. What if the clinic pays half? Provided you continue to work with our charity program. So I started studying for the first time in 3 years. The courses were difficult. Project management, legal aspects of nonprofit activities, fundraising, working with volunteers. But each lesson revealed something new, and I felt like my brain was waking up after a long sleep. Ethan got used to his mom sitting at the computer with textbooks in the evenings. Sometimes he would come up to me with his toys and sit next to me, studying with me. Is Mom studying? He would ask. Yes, Mom is studying to work better. Will I study too? Of course. When you grow up, you'll go to school, then to university. And I'll be smart like Mom? Conversations like these reinforced my confidence that I was doing the right thing. Ethan saw that education was important, that you could change your life if you put in the effort. 6 months after I started working at the clinic, I met Mark. He worked as a medical technologist in the lab on the second floor and often came down to us for test results. You're always so serious, he said one day, seeing me at the computer with a textbook next to me. Would you like to go for coffee after work? Mark was handsome, tall, dark-haired, with a nice smile. He was 28 years old, lived alone, and seemed interested in a serious relationship. I have a child, I said immediately, a 1.5-year-old son. I know, Rose told me, that's not a problem. We started seeing each other once a week. Mark was patient and understanding. He didn't try to rush things and was kind to Ethan. He looks like you, he said when he first saw my son. The same brown eyes. I hope he'll be smarter than his mother, I replied. What's wrong with his mother? You work, study, and raise a child on your own. I don't know any woman who can handle it so well. Mark said the right things, but something inside me resisted. Maybe I wasn't ready to trust a man after what happened with Kyle, or maybe I was just afraid that if I opened up to someone, I would become vulnerable again. You're very closed off, he said after 2 months of dating. It's like you're afraid to let me get close to you. I'm not afraid. I'm just cautious. Because of the child's father? I nodded. I told him about Kyle, about how he disappeared when he found out I was pregnant. Not all men are like that, Mark said gently. I'm not going to run away at the first sign of trouble. How can I know that? You can't. You just have to believe. But I wasn't ready to believe yet. A week after that conversation, I told Mark that it would be better for us to just stay friends. Maybe later, I said, when I'm more ready. He was disappointed, but he didn't insist. Okay, but know that if you want to try again, I'm here. That fall, I completed my first year of certification in nonprofit management. My grade was excellent, and my professor suggested I continue my studies in the master's program. You have a natural aptitude for this work, he wrote in my letter of recommendation. I encourage you to consider pursuing a full degree in this field. The master's program cost $15,000 a year. Even with a partial scholarship, it was too expensive. but the idea stayed with me. Meanwhile, Ethan started going to full-day preschool. He was a sociable, inquisitive child who made friends easily. The teacher said he was one of the smartest kids in the group. He's always asking why and how, his teacher Janice told me. He's interested in absolutely everything. Just like his mom, I smiled. He's proud of you. He always tells the other children that his mom goes to college. Those words warmed my heart. Maybe my example really does have a positive influence on him. One evening, as I was getting Ethan ready for bed, he suddenly asked, "Mom, where's my dad?" It was a question I had been afraid of. He hadn't asked about it before, but I knew that sooner or later he would notice that all his friends had parents. But he didn't. "Your dad lives far away," I said cautiously. "Very far away." "Why doesn't he come to see us?" "Sometimes adults decide to live apart. That doesn't mean your dad doesn't love you." "Do you love him?" "I used to. But now you're the most important thing in my life." Ethan thought for a moment, then nodded. "When I grow up, will I have a family?" "Of course. If you want to. I want to. And I'll be a good dad. You'll be the best dad in the world." When he fell asleep, I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about the future. Ethan deserves a better life than I can give him right now. He's smart, talented, and deserves all the opportunities that children from intact families have. I looked at the brochure about the master's program lying on the table. $15,000 was a huge amount of money, but it was also an investment in our future together. The next day, I went to the bank and asked about a student loan. The Mother's Embrace Foundation office occupied a small space on the first floor of an old building in the city center. 2 rooms, a mini kitchen, and a toilet, but it was ours. Mine. The sign on the door read, "Jessica Turner, Executive Director." "I can't believe it's only been 3 years," said Sarah, looking at the photos on the wall where I was receiving an award from the City Council for my contribution to the development of social programs. "Back then, you were afraid to even call potential donors. Now I make them listen to 30-minute presentations." I laughed, adjusting my business jacket. "Who would have thought?" Over the past year, the foundation has helped 72 young mothers, paying medical bills, legal consultations, daycare, and sometimes just buying groceries or diapers. The biggest achievement was a microcredit program for women who want to start their own business. I had 3 part-time employees and a dozen volunteers. The budget was $150,000 a year. Not a huge amount, but enough to make a real difference. "Your mom would have been proud," Sarah added quietly. I knew she meant well, but mentioning my mother always brought up mixed feelings. 4 years had passed since that night in the rain, and I still hadn't made a serious attempt to reconnect with my parents. "Maybe," I replied briefly and changed the subject. "How's the new fundraising campaign going?" Meanwhile, Ethan attended Little Geniuses, a private preschool, one of the best in town. At 4 years old, he could read simple sentences, knew numbers up to 100, and could say a few phrases in Spanish, which he was learning at kindergarten. "Mom, when I grow up, will I help people like you?" he asked one morning at breakfast. "If you want to. But you can be anything you want. A doctor, a teacher, even an astronaut." "Do astronauts help people?" "Of course. They explore space so that we can learn more about the world." Ethan nodded, satisfied with the answer, and returned to his cereal. Looking at him, I felt proud, and at the same time the pressure of responsibility. He had everything I wanted for him: stability, opportunities, a future without limitations. But the price of this success was high. David Clark came into my life through work. His law firm, Clark & Associates, specialized in corporate law, but David personally handled pro bono cases for nonprofit organizations. "Your foundation needs better legal protection," he said at our first meeting a year ago. "Donor contracts, employment agreements, licenses, everything needs a professional approach." David was 39 years old, divorced, and raising his 12-year-old daughter Emma on weekends. He was tall, with dark hair that was starting to turn gray at the temples and piercing gray eyes. Unlike Mark, David was in no hurry to get involved in personal relationships. For the first 6 months, we only met on business, but gradually began to spend more time together after work meetings. "Would you like to go out for dinner?" he suggested, after a particularly difficult day when we had struggled to save the fund's assets from being frozen due to a bureaucratic error. "I can't stay long. I need to pick up Ethan from daycare by 7. I know a great cafe near the daycare. 15 minutes and you'll be there." That first date lasted an hour. We talked about work, about children, about how difficult it is to balance a career and parenthood. "Emma sometimes says that I love my job more than her," David admitted. "When my colleagues call on the weekend, she rolls her eyes and says, 'Those boring adult things again.' Ethan thinks so too. Last week he said that the foundation is his rival for his mother's attention." "How do you deal with that?" "I try not to take my work home with me. On weekends, my phone is turned off for everyone except emergencies." David nodded understandingly. "I have the same principle. Saturdays and Sundays are for Emma only." Our relationship developed slowly. David was patient, didn't pressure me, and understood my priorities. 6 months later, he kissed me for the first time after dinner at an Italian restaurant. "I'm in no rush," he said when he noticed my embarrassment. "We can move at a pace that's comfortable for you." But even with David, who seemed like the perfect partner, I felt an inner resistance. When he offered to help with Ethan or with household chores, part of me worried, what if he changes his mind? What if he leaves me when things get tough? "You're afraid of depending on him," said Dr. Prescott, the therapist I started seeing 6 months ago. "I'm not afraid. I just want to be independent." Being independent and being afraid to trust are two different things. "Can you tell me about your parents?" The sessions with Dr. Prescott were difficult. I had to remember my childhood, analyze my relationship with my parents, and understand where my fears came from. "Your father abandoned you emotionally even before the night he kicked you out of the house," she explained. "A child who has not received unconditional love from their parents finds it difficult to believe that someone else can truly love them." "But I'm not a child. The adult parts of your personality aren't." "But the traumatized child inside you is still afraid of being abandoned again." Therapy helped, but progress was slow. I learned to recognize the moments when fear took hold of me, learned to talk to David about my feelings instead of withdrawing. "Sometimes I'm afraid you'll get tired of my problems," I confessed to him one evening. "Jess, everyone has problems. I do too. The difference is that we can solve them together or each on our own." "What if I'm not ready to rely on someone?" "Then I'll wait until you're ready. No pressure." It was during this period, when my personal life was finally starting to fall into place, that I received news about my parents. Gloria called on Saturday morning while I was making pancakes for Ethan. "Jessica, I'm sorry to bother you on your day off, but I thought you should know. Your father has contacted social services for help." "Dad?" I almost dropped the frying pan. "What happened?" "He lost his job a year ago. The evening car service where he worked closed down." "And your mother was hospitalized last month with diabetic coma." I sat down on a chair, feeling my heart pounding in my throat. "Is she alive?" "Yes, but her condition is serious. She needs expensive treatment and they don't have insurance. Your father looked broken." "Does he know you're calling me?" "Number." "But Jessica, maybe it's time." "I don't know, Gloria. I need to think about it." The next few days were chaotic. I couldn't concentrate on work, constantly thinking about my parents. Part of me wanted to go to them immediately to help, to forget all the hurt. But another part remembered that night in the rain, remembered how Dad called Ethan a premature baby. "What's bothering you?" David asked when he noticed that I was sitting at work late, not sorting through the papers on my desk. I told him everything. About how my parents kicked me out, about the last 4 years of silence, about Gloria's call. "And how do you feel?" he asked gently. "Anger, pain, guilt, all at once. They need help, and I have the opportunity to give it. But why should I? Why shouldn't you? Because they abandoned me when I needed support the most. Because Dad said horrible things about my son. It's all true. And you have a right to be angry. But the question is not whether they deserve forgiveness. The question is, what will help you live peacefully?" David was right, but the decision was no easier. I discussed it with Dr. Prescott at my next session. "Forgiveness is not condoning someone else's behavior," she explained. "It's freeing yourself from the anger that poisons your life. But if I help them, doesn't that mean their behavior was acceptable? It depends on how you do it. You can help by setting clear boundaries. You can express your feelings and expectations. What if they hurt me again? Then you'll know you did everything you could, and this time you have the resources to protect yourself." That night, I talked to Ethan for a long time before bed. He has grown into a smart and sensitive boy. "Mom, why are you sad?" he asked as I tucked him into bed. "Remember when I told you about my mom and dad?" "Your grandparents?" "Yes, they live far away. They are sick, and I don't know if I should help them." Ethan thought about it with a serious expression on his face. "When I was sick with my heart, did you help me?" "Of course." "Then why not help them? They're your mom and dad." Coming from the mouth of a 4-year-old, it sounded so simple. Perhaps it was precisely in this simplicity that wisdom lay. The next day, I called Gloria. "Tell Dad I'm ready to talk, but on neutral ground and on my terms." "Are you sure?" "No, but sometimes you have to do things you're not sure about." The meeting was set for Wednesday at 2 p.m. at the Sunny Day Cafe. I arrived 15 minutes early and sat down at a table by the window, from where I could see the parking lot. My heart was beating so loudly that it seemed like the whole cafe could hear it. When I saw my parents walking toward the entrance, I almost lost my breath. They had aged 10 years in those 4 years. Dad had lost weight and his hair had turned gray. Mom was dragging her leg and leaning on a cane. It was time to face the past face to face. That Tuesday, I was on a conference call with City Council representatives discussing the expansion of support programs for young mothers when Laura, our new employee, quietly knocked on my office door. "Jessica, sorry to interrupt. You have visitors. They say they're relatives." "Relatives?" I covered the microphone with my hand. "Who exactly?" "An elderly couple, Ralph and Deborah Turner. They said they're your parents." My heart skipped a beat. 5 years of complete silence, and suddenly they were here, in my office. "Tell them I'll be ready in 5 minutes," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But when Laura left, I needed a few deep breaths to calm down. I looked at myself in the mirror on the desk. A business black suit, hair pulled back in an elegant style, flawless makeup. Jessica Turner, executive director of a charitable foundation. Not that frightened girl with a child in her arms, begging them not to throw her out into the rain. "Gentlemen, I have to end our conversation," I said into the phone. "I have an unexpected meeting. Shall we continue tomorrow at 10? When I went out to the reception area, I saw them. They were sitting on the edge of the sofa, holding each other's hands, looking tired, aged, and confused. Dad had lost weight. His hair had turned almost white. Mom was leaning on a cane, and I noticed how difficult every movement was for her. "Hi," I said simply. "Jess." Mom got up from the sofa with visible effort. "Darling, how you've changed." She wanted to hug me, but I didn't move. Instead, I nodded toward her office. "Come in. Let's talk privately." My office was impressive. A large oak table, leather chairs, walls covered with diplomas, certificates, and photographs from special events. In one of them, I was standing next to the mayor, receiving the Woman of the Year in Charity Award. In another, I was speaking at a conference in front of an audience of several hundred people. My parents sat across from my desk and remained silent, looking around. I saw my father reading the plaque on my desk. Jessica Turner, Executive Director. His face was expressionless, but I noticed him press his lips together. Coffee? Tea? I offered, switching into professional mode. No, thank you, my mother replied quietly. Jess, we came because we want to talk to you. I'm listening. They exchanged glances. My father cleared his throat. We know what happened between us. It was difficult for everyone, and we thought that maybe it's time to make peace. Make peace, I repeated neutrally. I see. What specifically made you think that? Jess, we're your parents, Mom said. Family should stick together. Interesting. 5 years ago, you had a different opinion about family ties. Dad sat up straight in his chair. Jessica, we came here with good intentions. There's no need to bring up the past. No need to bring up the past? I almost laughed. Dad, you and Mom showed up here after 5 years of silence, talking about reconciliation. I have a right to know what has changed. What has changed is that we have grown older and wiser, Mom replied, and we have realized that family is the most important thing. And when I was 25 and left alone with a sick child, family wasn't the most important thing. They exchanged glances again. I could see that the conversation wasn't going as they had planned. Jess, Dad said slowly, you have to understand that things were very difficult back then. The hospital bills, your mother lost her job, I was barely making ends meet. And the easiest solution was to get rid of the problem in the form of your daughter and grandson? That's not how it was. Dad raised his voice. We hoped you would understand how difficult it is to raise a child without support and make a sensible decision. What sensible decision? He was silent again. Mom looked at the floor. To give the child up for adoption, she whispered finally. Oh, that's what it was. I leaned back in my chair. So the problem wasn't money or that you couldn't help me. The problem was that I didn't listen to your advice to give my own child away to strangers. Jessica, you don't understand, Dad began. We wanted a better life for you. A better life? I got up from the table and walked over to the wall with the photos. You mean a life like this? I pointed to a photo of me standing behind a podium, speaking at a national conference on poverty alleviation, or this one. I pointed to another photo where I was with the foundation team presenting a check for $50,000 to a children's hospital. Or maybe this one? The third photo, me with Ethan at his kindergarten graduation. He was 5 years old, wearing a little academic gown, holding a diploma for Best Academic Achievement. My parents were silent as they looked at the photos. Is that your son? My mother whispered. Yes, Ethan. Your grandson whom you've never met. He's a very handsome boy. He's smart, kind, healthy. His heart is working perfectly after the operation. He speaks 3 languages, reads at a 3rd grade level, swims, and plays the piano. I turned back to them. So when you talk about a better life, I don't quite understand what you mean. My life is pretty good. Dad finally spoke up. We're proud of you, Jess. We really are. We didn't know you were so successful. You didn't know because you weren't interested. In 5 years, not a single phone call, not a single letter, not even when Ethan was in intensive care after his operation. We thought... Mom started, but I interrupted her. You thought I would break down, that I would come to you on my knees begging for help, and then you could say, we told you so. Mom started to cry quietly. Jess, we love you. We always have. Love isn't just words, Mom, it's actions. And your actions showed me that your love is conditional. What do you mean? I mean that you loved me as long as I met your expectations, as long as I was an obedient daughter who didn't cause any trouble. But when I made a mistake and needed help, your love suddenly disappeared. Dad tried to justify himself again. Jessica, you have to understand our situation. We couldn't... Dad, stop. My voice was calm but firm. I don't want to hear excuses. It's been 5 years. I made my conclusions and accepted the situation a long time ago. I went back to my desk and sat down. Now tell me the real reason for your visit. Gloria Mendez told me about your health and work problems. Dad's face turned red. So you know. I know. Mom is in the hospital with diabetes. Dad lost his job, bills you can't pay. And suddenly you remembered the daughter you kicked out of the house. It's not fair, Mom whispered. Not fair? I leaned forward. Mom, fairness is when parents support their children in difficult times, not kick them out into the rain with a baby in their arms. There was a long pause. Finally, Dad sighed. Okay, yes, we have problems. Big problems. Your mom needs special treatment that we can't afford. And I'm too old to find a new job at a car repair shop. And you thought to ask me for help. You're our daughter. Now I'm your daughter. Interesting. I opened the desk drawer and took out a folder. Do you know what this is? They shook their heads. These are the founding documents of our foundation. The charter clearly states who we help: young mothers in difficult life circumstances, women who need medical care for themselves or their children, people who are in trouble and have no family support. I looked at them. Mom fits these criteria. What are you trying to say? Mom asked. I'm saying I'm ready to help, but as the director of a charity, not as a daughter. I pulled out another document. This is an application for assistance. Mom needs to be added to our client database. We will pay for diabetes treatment and select a rehabilitation program. The maximum amount of assistance is $12,000 per year. Jess, we can also help Dad with employment. We have partnerships with several employers who are loyal to hiring older people. My parents looked at me suspiciously. And what is the price of this assistance? My dad asked. There is no price. Just fill out the paperwork and follow the program rules. That's it? You don't want us to… What? Apologize? Admit our guilt? I shook my head. No, I'm not a child waiting for an apology from my parents. I'm a professional offering help to those who need it. Mom started crying even harder. Jess, honey, we want to be part of your life. We want to meet Ethan. Ethan has grandparents on David's side, my partner. They love him and support him. He has everything he needs, but we are his real grandparents. I looked at her long and calmly. Real grandparents are the ones who were there when the child was having a hard time, who cared about his health, attended performances at the kindergarten, read bedtime stories. For 5 years, you didn't even know if your grandson was alive. We can fix everything. No, Mom, you can't. Some things can't be fixed. But that doesn't mean you have to live in hatred. I got up from the table. I'm offering you help because I believe that every person deserves support when they are having a hard time, even those who once let me down. But I'm not offering to restore our relationship. So you don't forgive us? Dad whispered. Forgiveness is not something you can demand from me. It's something I give myself. And I forgave myself long ago for what happened. I forgave myself for believing that you would support me, and I freed myself from the need for your approval. I walked to the office door. If you want to use our services, Laura will give you the necessary documents. If not, that's your right. What about Ethan? Mom tried one last time. What exactly? We could see him sometimes. I thought about it. Maybe. Someday. If he wants to, but first I need to make sure you won't hurt him the way you hurt me. What do you mean? Ethan is a special child. He's smart, sensitive, kind, and I won't let anyone, not even you, make him feel unwanted or not good enough. My parents sat silently for a few minutes. Then my dad stood up. Can we see these documents? Of course. Laura will explain everything to you. As they were leaving the office, my mom turned around. Jess, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Really. Thank you, Mom. But your pride is no longer important to me. When the door closed, I sat down in a chair and closed my eyes. I had imagined this meeting for 5 years. Sometimes I dreamed that they would come and beg for forgiveness. Sometimes I was afraid that I would become that helpless girl again, begging for their love. But in reality, Everything turned out differently. I felt neither anger nor pain, only calmness and a strange feeling of completeness. My phone rang. A photo of Ethan appeared on the screen. He was smiling, showing his 2 front teeth that had recently grown in. "Hi, Mom," his cheerful voice rang out. "When are you coming to pick me up?" "In an hour, sweetie." "How's school?" "Great. Guess what? David says he's taking us fishing on Saturday. Will you come with us?" "Of course I will." "Awesome. Mom, are you happy today?" I looked at the photos on the wall, at my framed master's degree in nonprofit management, at the pile of documents about the foundation's new projects. "Yes, Ethan. I'm very happy today." "Then I'm happy too. See you later." When the conversation ended, I got up and went to the window. It was drizzling outside, but it didn't remind me of that terrible night 5 years ago. Now it was just rain. And I was just a woman who had built a good life for herself and her child, despite everything, and that was enough.